By the end of this video, I will convince you that Keir Starmer, the freshly ousted Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was the worst Prime Minister for trans rights in the history of the UK. If you're wondering how that could even be possible, why don't we start with this?
Mr. Speaker, I am a gooner. My work is done.
What do you mean your work is done? You didn't do anything.
Didn't I?
There's abuse and vilification and violence against trans people on a daily basis. I think the way the media are dealing with this is completely wrong, and it resonates almost with the old Section 28 debate. Same argument, same challenging, same characterisation, same stereotyping, if you like. And in years to come, we will look back at this period and say that the way this issue was dealt with was completely wrong, just as we look back now at Section 28 and know that that was completely wrong. Trans rights are human rights, and I support the right to self-identification. You know, just as we stood up against Section 28, we've also got to stand up here for trans rights and take that fight on.
Many months later.
The judges have said what we always believed to be the case, that women are protected by their biological sex.
It is a victory for common sense, and it's a victory for women's rights. Calling someone a man or a woman is not vilifying them, it's just describing them accurately. And you need to be able to describe people accurately in order to keep them safe and in order to protect other people's rights. So even talking about it in terms of vilification is wrong. Everybody is born male or female, and that cannot change.
The Equality and Human Rights Commission has abandoned trans guidance for schools.
There is not enough evidence about the long-term effects of using puberty blockers. I am acting on the Commission's advice to put an indefinite order in place to restrict the sale or supply of puberty blockers.
Trans people can now be banned from single-sex toilets in places like hospitals and gyms. I just wondered whether you welcome that and whether you believe that that means, therefore, that trans people cannot be considered as women.
Welcome to BBC News, the right-wing news channel that all right-wingers think is run entirely by communists. Our top story tonight: Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and worst Prime Minister in the history of this most wet and gloomy island for trans people. Sir Keir Starmer, also known as Sir Keir Starver, or Sir Queer Harmer, or simply Keith, or as his wife knows him, a filthy cheater and a liar, had strong competition for the title of most transphobic Prime Minister from Liz Truss, the sworn enemy of lettuces everywhere, lest she one day seek revenge on the cruciferous vegetable community, and Rishi Sunak, who set the stage for the hostile environment for trans people that their Kermit voice successor would mould the UK into. Here to report on this story is our science and culture correspondent. Wait a second, that doesn't sound right. Oh, Jesus Christ. That chthonic cult that calls itself a newspaper has opened a blood portal into our offices again. Someone call J.K. Rowling. We're going to need her anti-transgender bioweapon. Yes, the mould. And ready your firearms. We're not going down without a fight. Good evening, Britain. What was that you just heard? Don't worry about it. Nothing at all is happening in the BBC studios, and no one is currently flooding halls filled with screaming journalists and overpaid radio hosts with any creatures beyond our mortal ken. Pay no attention to that, and pay attention instead to me, Bridget Empire, science and culture correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, your future state broadcaster. Today's top story: the worst Prime Minister in history for trans rights has resigned. Good news, that guy sucked. The bad news is his successors will be probably worse. And no, I don't mean the Keir in the north that'll replace him for a few years, though from what Andy Burnham has said himself, things aren't likely to change for the better under his watch, at least for trans people. I'm talking about the man all but guaranteed to win the next general election, and a man who spent his school days telling his classmates Hitler was right, and to his Jewish classmates, gas them all, Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage would just come up to him in a random sort of way and say, Hitler should have gassed you all.
So let's talk about why Sir Keir Starmer was so incredibly awful to trans people that he managed to out-nasty party the previous 14 years of Conservative rule, and whether his replacements will do things any differently, for better or for worse.
Sorry,
Changing the things
what is
that
that
need
vision?
changing.
What
And
is that
that is the
vision?
change that I will bring about.
It has recently come to my attention that a lot of Americans don't know who Keir Starmer is. And to those of you for whom that is true, 1, I envy you, and 2, really he's the kind of person where it would be easier to list the things he hasn't made worse in this country than all the awful shit he's actually done. It came to my attention a few months before that a lot of you, my audience, are American, and therefore statistically a significant chunk of you don't know, for example, how Sir Keir Starmer went from working under Jeremy Corbyn, an actual decent human being who wanted to do nice things for the country and make things slightly less bad, to aiding and abetting in crimes that are supposed to get you hanged at The Hague.
These findings reveal not an armed conflict directed at military objectives, but a radically disproportionate attack deliberately intended to devastate the town and its civilian population.
A siege is appropriate, cutting off power, cutting off water.
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation.
Stripping trans people of healthcare and banning us from public spaces, and clamping down on civil liberties with a hand heavier than anything we've seen in post-war Britain. Well, if you're still in the dark, let me give you a little rundown. A very reductive and abridged history of the man history will remember as the handmaiden to British fascism in the 21st century, Sir Keir Rodney Starmer.
I also got made a Queen's Counsel, which is odd since I often used to oppose the abolition of the monarchy.
Keith, or as he is officially known, and this is not a joke, the Right Honourable Sir Keir Rodney Starmer, KCB KCMP, those last 3 things meaning of the Most Honourable Order of the Bath, King's Counsel and Member of Parliament, again all of these things are genuinely real, was, until just about a week ago, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and the settler colony the ruling class refused to leave, despite the fact that most of them forget it exists most of the time, and the fact that it's on a whole different island. For any Americans who don't know what a Prime Minister is, imagine a burger. The burger represents the state. The bun represents the head of state, a president or a king, and while in the UK the monarchy has very little power to make policy despite the attempts of the current king to influence anyone within earshot of him, the monarch is still technically head of state, so the person in charge of that country, as much as any one person is the Prime Minister.
Crazy hamburger!
Was that too patronising? I'm sorry, I've been watching the footage from that Freedom 250 State Fair in Washington, D.C., and from what I can see, a lot of the people in charge of the USA have recently had a lobotomy. Still, no matter how many scoops their doctors have taken out of their brains, they're only just more shit and incompetent than the people in charge over here. Like our protagonist, Keir, named after the founder of the Labour Party, Keir Hardie, a man with much better opinions than Keir Starmer on just about everything, and a man, I believe, if he saw what the Labour Party had become under Keir Starmer, would have shot the Prime Minister and then himself.
Trust me, Gage. It's the only way.
Keir Starmer was, unfortunately for the trans community and anyone who believes in justice for Palestine, however, born unshot in London in 1962, and in his teens was part of Labour Party Young Socialists. Everything he ever professed to believe in during this time, he would go back on if he ever believed it at all. And this would be a theme throughout his career. Just for one example, in the 1980s, Keir Starmer was one of the editors for Trotskyist newspaper Socialist Alternative, run by the Labour-affiliated faction of the same name. Once Keir Starmer was leader of the Labour Party, he prescribed Socialist Alternative and other socialist groups from the party under spurious grounds, while expelling members of the Labour Party across the country for holding opinions he once claimed for himself, including expelling a large number of Jewish members of the Labour Party for anti-Semitism, when all they'd actually done is opposed the massive war crime beginning with a G being done to the Palestinians with Keir Starmer's say-so.
Not a proper Jew, the wrong sort of Jew, self-hating Jew.
Keir Starmer would, in time, aid and abet this most grievous of crimes, and do so much to run cover for it that, because of his insane clampdowns on civil liberties, on free speech, and the right to protest, you can now go to jail for terrorism for 14 years for stating in public that you oppose that G-word and support a certain group demanding action for Palestine. And you might not even need to be tried in front of a jury because he's decided they're too sympathetic to people opposing war crimes. To this end, he's also massively restricted the internet, and is trying to make it a terrorism offence to use news sources from countries that he doesn't like. Also, he's trying to fuck with YouTube now, trying to get any content not from mainstream UK news services deprioritised in the algorithm, so between that, the crackdowns on pro-Palestine speech, and the relentless attacks on trans people we'll get to later, it's hard not to take Keir Starmer's decisions in office personally. Has he seen this channel? Because he's acting like he has seen it and that he hates it. And if so, hello Keith. Don't worry, we can solve this issue without stripping the country of basic rights to protest and speak freely. If you pay me £10 million, Keith, I will stop this channel forever. I will shut up forever. It's your call. Coffee.com/BridgetEmpire or Patreon.com/BridgetEmpire. I'll see you in there, Mr. Starmer. In another moment of stark irony, Keir Starmer trained as a defence lawyer and human rights lawyer, but would later, way before he made himself the British face of Israel's ultimate sin on the world stage, become the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, the king of the cops, a position he used to flex his authoritarian streak for perhaps the first time, opening all-night courts to prosecute the large number of largely black and brown people that participated in the London riots in protest against the police murder of Mark Duggan. People received disproportionate sentences for petty crimes in an attempt to punish people round the clock, not for the petty crimes they were actually being charged with, but for having the gall to take to the streets, and demanding we change a system where the police can get away with unaliving black men for the simple crime of being in public while black. During these all-night courts, one solicitor recalled witnessing prisoners crammed 3 to a cell with no toilet facilities, defendants remanded in custody on the basis of no evidence, judges rubber-stamping prosecution applications, and all but ignoring the safeguards of the Bail Act. Prosecutors involved in the case admitted that defendants who played a minor role in the riots were given disproportionately harsh sentences. Another lawyer said of the chaos that, unless we remain vigilant, all the bad features of Wright case process and courts will be foisted upon us as a desirable template, with rule of law and due process swept aside as so much tedious sophistry. Foreshadowing is a literary device in which... Okay, no, screw it. We're talking about it now.
The British government would prefer if you didn't see this plane. It's just taken off from a Royal Air Force base on Cyprus and is flying towards Palestine. On board, the crew are about to spy on Gaza and share intelligence with the armed forces of Israel.
Sir Keir Starmer later was involved in the Yugoslav trials at The Hague, where you can find video of him representing Croatia, attempting to get Serbia charged with the big G word he would later help commit himself for the war crimes committed in Vukovar. You see, Keir Starmer is well versed in human rights and the rule of law, and he's extremely familiar with what international law considers that G word crime, what it looks like, and what your obligations are as a country to stop one occurring if you see it. When Israel started their campaign in 2023, however, Keir Starmer appeared on LBC to tell the country that Israel has the right to withhold food and water from Gaza, which is, as he knows, a war crime. He ordered spy planes over Gaza to feed intelligence to Israel used to perpetuate the crime of all crimes, and thanked the people in our Cyprus airbase for their work doing this crime, telling them,
I'm also aware that some or quite a bit of what goes on here can't necessarily be talked about all of the time. It isn't, although we're really proud of what you're doing, we can't necessarily tell the world what you're doing here. And therefore it makes it really important to say thank you, to acknowledge that. Because although we're not saying it to the whole world for reasons that are obvious to you, the whole world is relying on you. And everybody back at home is relying on you and knowing that you will be there. So a big thanks from me. You know, the service, there's no higher service than the service that you give to our country. I talk about service in politics, but the service you give firsthand to your country to make us safe as a country and our allies safe in a really volatile time at the moment in the world, that is the highest form of service. I am grateful. The country is grateful.
and this is before he clamped down on people protesting this crime at home, prescribing the organisation Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation, meaning expressing support for the organisation could get you charged for terrorism, arresting people en masse for holding signs supporting them, rigging trials to prosecute those that took action in the organisation, trying to get rid of jury trials so they wouldn't be found not guilty, and restricting media and especially the internet to try to make sure no narratives that might portray the war crimes he was helping to commit in the region as bad could be heard.
Within minutes of the Court of Appeal's announcement backing the UK government's decision last year to prescribe Palestine Action as a terror group, its supporters were being forcibly arrested.
You speak against the government, you write words they don't like, and this is what they do to you.
So, how did a guy this unprincipled, this slimy, this prone to lying, the former chief prosecutor of all people, become the leader of the Labour Party after principled old man who wanted to do nice things Jeremy Corbyn? Well, that's simple. He did it by lying.
They're building this sort of Jeremy Corbyn style manifesto where anything you want can go in it. None of it is costed. It's a recipe for more of the same. Jeremy Corbyn made our party the party of anti-austerity, and he was right to do so. The party that would fight cuts to public services. He made us the party that wanted to invest more heavily in our public services, and he was right to do so. And we must retain that. We build on that. We don't trash it as we go forward.
Just to remind you of your manifesto pledge. When you became Labour leader, this is what it said. Services should be in public hands, not making profits. You actually mentioned rail, mail, energy, water. So we know that's what you want to do still, right?
We've had to make a decision about realistically we can do.
So that was a mistake?
No. I mean, I don't think...
You want to do it, but it's not going to happen.
We've been through, a pandemic.
Starmer was in Corbyn's shadow cabinet, which, for the Americans listening, is basically like if the Democrats currently had a fake Secretary of Defense, etc., for every executive position, so they could directly challenge the Republicans in those areas and demonstrate how they would do things differently. Starmer was Corbyn's Brexit secretary, after trying to coup him briefly, but he would properly stick the knife in by announcing that the Labour Party would offer a second Brexit referendum at conference, something he did not get permission to do. This locked Labour into a position that would ultimately destroy them at the ballot box and destroy the party, splitting its base apart, and something they were already struggling to balance, as well as the constant smears of anti-Semitism, since Corbyn was pro-Palestine in a time where a lot of people didn't know what was happening there.
It's right that Parliament has the first say. It's right that Parliament has the first say. But if we need to break the impasse, our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option.
Once Starmer was leader, he would fire Corbyn for anti-Semitism and expel him from the Labour Party, a position he had held for decades, claiming they were never friends, despite calling him a friend in previous speeches.
He's a friend, and he's led us through some really difficult times.
Was he a friend?
No.
And whether he was my friend or not, it was a surprise to me, actually, but there we go.
and ranting about how he had saved the party from the mess Corbyn had left. Despite him being part of that team, Corbyn's Labour receiving more votes than he did in both general elections that Corbyn ran in, and Starmer's leadership taking Labour from the largest political party in Europe to hundreds of thousands of people leaving the Labour Party and starving it of funds and support, as Starmer spent much of his tenure as leader telling all of Labour's activists and supporters that he hates them and that they should fuck off. And we did.
Fuck off.
He would never earn that support back. Just in case you're wondering how it is that he just keeps getting more and more unpopular, well, the thing is, he has no flaw, because he has no loyalists. The Labour base is a base no more. When Starmer ran for Labour leader, he promised to be like Jeremy Corbyn but wearing a suit, and laid out 10 pledges he would keep as promises to the people who voted him in. Once in, he broke every single one of them, did a complete pivot to the far right, and eventually won a general election by default because the Conservative Party imploded after eradicating thousands of his own citizens in a plague, crashing the economy, and being defeated in single combat by a lettuce. Starmer's platform was, in large part, we will do what the Tories are doing, but more efficient. But his manifesto said change on it, in big letters. So, a lot of Liberals around the country, including lots of people I know, heard this, and instead of hearing Starmer's actual words, heard, I'm actually very left-wing, and I'm lying about it, but once I'm in, I'm totally going to do a wealth tax and proportional representation and rejoin the EU, and he would do basically nothing for them. Absolutely nothing. Wasted potential, except for cruelty, with a majority bigger than some of those used to completely transform the country, with the kind of mandate that created the NHS and the welfare state from nothing. The change Keir Starmer brought to that country with that potential was destroying the lives of trans people, immigrants and disabled people, allowing racist pogroms annually across the country, committing crimes against humanity, and destroying our civil liberties one after the other.
I'm pretty depressed, to be honest. I have a lot of respect for J.K. Rowling.
So that's pretty bad. And you can hear a lot about this in various videos I and other people have made. But let me zoom in for you on the complete horror show that has been what Keir Starmer has done to trans people in Britain under his watch, and how he took one of the most highly rated countries for queer people in the world, despite the problems we already had, and brought us in line with Putin's Russia.
I'm Trinidadi, and let's queer up the worldview. Spain tops ILGA Europe's 2026 LGBTQ+ rights ranking. Spain has overtaken Malta as Europe's top country for LGBTQ+ rights.
This is the ILGA Europe's rainbow map. ILGA Europe is an advocacy group consisting of 500 organisations that promote lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans and intersex interests across Europe. Their rainbow map is frequently used to track the progress of different European countries on queer rights, and also to warn people of which countries are dangerous or risky to travel to or live in as a queer person. This time 10 years ago, the UK was one of the highest ranking countries in Europe for queer people. Despite our archaic and horrendously gatekeeping medical system, we had legal gender recognition, though extremely draconian in nature, expensive and inaccessible. We had gay marriage, and trans and gay people were increasingly becoming an accepted and even celebrated part of society by liberals, leftists and most young people. Despite not having self-ID, despite it being very difficult to transition in the country, and despite there still being a big risk of harassment and discrimination for being trans by employers, by strangers, by people on the street, compared to most of Europe, it was beginning to look like Britain might lead the way on queer rights on the continent. In 2017, for example, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn led the two major parties, both explicitly pro-trans and both making noises, if muted, about eventually implementing a similar self-ID policy to Ireland to remove the draconian gender recognition process and implementing a trans-inclusive ban on conversion therapy. In the background, however, the trans panic in the British mainstream media was gearing up for a full swing. Every newspaper in Britain was beginning what would become a multi-decade habit of publishing multiple news stories a week portraying trans people as inherently violent SA mongers who prey on poor defenceless cis women and groom children into mutilating themselves. The same people who believed that, despite all evidence, trans people were some sort of death cult were in the back benches, and indeed the cabinets, of Theresa May, for example, whose successor, Boris Johnson, would start the ball rolling on the state's clampdown on trans rights, to be followed even more harshly by Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, pushed by their cabinet picks like Suella Braverman and especially current Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer sat in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet. Even outside of Starmer, Corbyn allies such as then MP Laura Pidcock and union movement bigwig Mark Sawatka would push this narrative. Under Corbyn, Wes Streeting remained on the backbenches, thank God, but his time would come. Rosie Duffield also sat on the backbenches, unpunished for eschewing all of her ministerial duties to live outside of her constituency and dedicate her life to trying to get all trans people thrown off the White Cliffs of Dover like she was trying to invent some sort of bigoted version of the Tarpeian Rock. With that in mind, take a look at the rainbow map for 2017. The UK is number 2 in Europe with 76%, only behind Norway. Spain, which would become probably the most attractive destination for queer people in 2026, is still on a measly 67%. Only 5 points higher than my old stomping grounds, Republika Hrvatska. Ajmo Hrvati, mi smo više I više gej svaki dan. Oprostite, molim vas. What I mean to say is, compare the map in 2017 to 2026. The UK is now far below Spain and below moja draga Hrvatska, with Spain on 88.7%, the highest in Europe, with better queer rights than any country had in 2017, and any other country in Europe now. As you might imagine, if you are familiar with how, despite everything, Pedro Sanchez has been working on getting every queer person in Europe to be slowly persuaded, Croatia is now on 51%, down from 62%, which tracks given the resistance to legalising gay marriage and the attempts to bring the TERF movement to the Balkans, despite the wishes of the queer communities on the ground in the former Yugoslavia. And Britain has gone from 76% all the way down to 43%, ranking below Spain, Malta, Iceland, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg, Greece, Portugal, Netherlands, Ireland, France, Austria, Slovenia, Montenegro, Croatia, Switzerland, and Estonia. A massive drop of 33%, a whole Kosovo's worth of queer rights wiped out in 10 years. The only countries coming even close to backsliding on queer rights as much as we did in this timeline being Hungary and Georgia, and even then, by like a third of the amount that the UK did. In the words of the organisation in brief, the United Kingdom dropped to 22nd in the ranking, its lowest position ever. The UK was ranked number 1 in 2015 with 86 points. Points were deducted following a Supreme Court ruling that defines the terms woman, man and sex strictly based on biological sex, and as a result, legal gender recognition is no longer fully effective regardless of obtaining a gender recognition certificate. A person will still be treated as their sex assigned at birth in various areas of public life. Legal gender recognition should enable a person to legally function and be recognised in their affirmed gender in all areas of life. This is no longer the case in the UK. The ruling, along with interim guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, means that individuals with a GRC are not fully recognised as their affirmed gender in important legal contexts. And despite what many centrists confused about why anyone could possibly hate Keir Starmer might think, this was almost entirely down to the absolute devastation of Keir Starmer's scorched earth campaign against trans people. In fact, the most generous interpretation of what has happened to queer rights under Starmer's watch relies you on believing that Wes Streeting, the transphobic demon and health secretary Keir Starmer appointed, in a move much like May putting Johnson in her cabinet to prevent the ambitious little prick from stabbing him in the back, eviscerated trans rights across the country despite Starmer's wishes, including influencing the decisions of the Education Secretary, the management of the semi-independent Equality and Human Rights Commission, to which Starmer appointed another transphobe at the head after firing Liz Truss's favourite EHRC leader, and Starmer was so scared of getting cooed by a man who won his seat by only a few hundred votes that he, and this is just a brief list of the things that this government has done to trans people in an extremely short period of time, continued the Tories' temporary ban on puberty blockers and made it permanent, resulting in the deaths of multiple children, banned healthcare for many trans people, banned trans people from changing rooms, hospital wards, all sports and sports games, and tournaments that aren't explicitly mixed sex, enforced that trans people be locked in male prisons while they are demonstrably at risk of so much violence, including chronic SA, that it is considered a second sentence and by many a death sentence, made it de facto illegal to have intercourse consensually as a trans person, discriminated against and disbelieved trans refugees to send them back into danger, used the murder of a trans child, thanks to rhetoric and actions he endorsed and enforced, as an excuse to turn Britain into a 24-hour surveillance state, discouraged and incentivized doctors against giving trans people life-saving medical care, created and facilitated an environment where trans people can be at any point fired and sued into oblivion for the crime of being visible while trans in their workplace, making the already dismal state of employment rates for trans people even worse, because no company wants to go bankrupt because some bigot saw a trans person in a corridor and called J.K. Rowling to get some of that Harry Potter money, reformed the education system to push through a ban on learning about trans people in education, essentially a diluted Section 28 where gay people are allowed but trans people are blasted out of existence, as well as enforcing the outing of trans kids to potentially abusive parents despite all rules about safeguarding, shut down private trans health clinics trying to fill in the gap left by his attacks on trans healthcare, voided the Gender Recognition Act by accepting the Supreme Court judgment that led to him enacting a bathroom ban, meaning there is now no legal recognition for trans people, and those that have that recognition it no longer counts for, and de facto legalising discrimination against trans people, if you accept the EHRC decision over the actual text of the Equality Act, that is, which Starmer's regime does, but several courts have proven not to. That will play out, I imagine, in the coming years. And last but not least, drafted a ban on conversion therapy that actually doesn't ban it at all, and in fact outlines how to do conversion therapy to trans people in a way that complies with this law, which shouldn't be surprising given the Cass review, the Tory-commissioned anti-science pile of shit that earned Baroness Cass a place in the House of Lords despite being wholly rejected by the scientific community for throwing out almost all studies because she felt like it, and including debunked fraudulent studies as her evidence instead, also recommends a form of conversion therapy as a treatment for trans people, and was the thing that Starmer and Streeting used to justify their permanent ban on puberty blockers and sentencing multiple children to death for the crime of being trans in a world where J.K. Rowling is loud and rich enough to make being kind to trans people just annoying enough for people with no principles to decide they'd actually prefer that we all just die or go back to the closet than to tell her to shut the fuck up. I have made many videos detailing these decisions, which of course I encourage you to watch. In fact, if you haven't heard about this and you are shocked by what I'm saying, this would be a good time to get educated on what just happened, as Starmer's premiership finally has ended. But I can't even say I blame you for not knowing, outside of the bathroom ban and the Cass review, just how bad things have been getting consistently during this government. Starmer himself started this mess, marching at Pride with trans flags, pretending to be an ally to the community. He said the right things to certain people. He obviously knows what trans people need. He has listed what needs to be done himself. But he is an empty, cynical man who has no real convictions or principles of his own. He only seemingly wanted power. And so, the moment he got in, he started tearing us apart. And despite that, he has the cheek to keep throwing pride parties at number 10, with trans flags up, and token trans people there to offer him legitimacy for his government. By far, the worst government in the history of the country for stripping the rights from and attacking trans people. A new low, in a country that's practically built on new lows. Even now, as he's kicked out of office for being terminally unpopular, unsurprising for someone who first lied to, then betrayed, then purged, then impoverished and criminalised the base of the Labour Party, he held one last Pride party where he gave a cheery speech about being proud to have had the gayest government ever, and was introduced as, and laughed along with the idea that he is a lesbian-style icon. Whoever you are who introduced him as such, you will not see the kingdom of heaven.
I have the huge honour of introducing the Prime Minister to you this evening, a man who I have been very proud to work for. He has also inspired me personally in many ways. One of the most significant ways is my hairstyle. So, it's a great privilege to be able to introduce you lesbian style icon.
Lesbian style icon, I like that. I'm really proud that we've got the gayest parliament. I don't think just of all time, anywhere in the world, I don't think there's any parliament that is gayer than this part. That is fantastic. The HIV action plan is really good to end transmissions by 2030. We've legislated to equalise all existing strands of hate crime and make them aggravated offences. And again, the announcement through LIV last week, a full trans-inclusive ban on abusive conversion practices. Again, not before time. Really important. We put an end to those practices.
But just as some more detail of what is still happening to trans people just this year under Keir Starmer, here are the words of Direct Action Group Bash Back on the continued injustices happening under our noses, while most people either look the other way or have no idea the extent of the attacks on trans people under a Labour government that should burst into flames for even daring to share a name with Keir Hardie's party. In February, we received updated draft statutory guidance for gender in schools in England that risks real harm to trans youth, with more than an echo of Section 28. At the end of May, the EHRC released its new guidance, effectively banning trans people from areas of public life, and which the Lemkin Institute for the G-word prevention has condemned as G-word-cidal. Side note, YouTube, let me say the words that are happening to my community, please, without being demonetized. This is fucking insane. In nature. In healthcare, our community continues to report GPs refusing not only bridging prescriptions, shared care with private providers, and continuity of prescriptions from abroad, but even describing hormones on instruction from GICs. In Pride Month, nurses in Darlington celebrated a payout of £185,000 for refusing to share a changing room with a trans woman, costing the NHS £600,000 in legal fees. In Sussex, the decision was made to pull the plug on a vital resource for trans youth and adults in Brighton, WellBN Clinic. New Victoria Hospital will stop providing transmasculine bottom surgeries from the end of 2026. A Scottish judge ruled in June that allowing some trans prisoners to be held in the estate matching their gender is unlawful. Trans women prisoners are therefore to be quietly moved from women's estate. The Scottish Government will not be appealing. The draft bill for banning conversion therapy exposes trans people to abuse in both regulated and unregulated settings, and its absurd distinction between conversion practices and abusive conversion practices opened the door to allowing conversion therapy in other contexts too. Designating causing trans people to have or believe they have a transgender identity or a particular transgender identity as a form of conversion therapy could mean the law is used to attack trans-supportive people, including healthcare providers, for supposedly transing people. I, of course, cannot legally suggest that you join Bash Back and help them fight back. No, seriously, I don't think I can legally. Or that if you can't do direct action, that you perhaps join Trans Liberation Group or another group and help socialist liberatory organisations organise against this. Legally speaking, I can't do that. That is. And yes, in there you may have had your ears perk up at the Lemkin Institute warning of the risk of the big G in the UK in the wake of the Supreme Court decision and subsequent bathroom ban and ban from basically all places and even workplaces if people decide to take action. Something that, if it got as bad as the experts on this sort of thing warn it has the potential to do, would have J.K. Rowling tried at The Hague. Which, if nothing else, would be a really weird thing to read about in the history books in 50 years. Now, before you scoff at this, remember, these things never start with a firing squad. They build up, and you have to catch these things in the build-up and put a stop to them before they get there. And this is not, of course, to try and make out that trans people are the most oppressed group in the UK, because we are not. At least those of us that are white and well off. And with the way Starmer has been moving, especially given Farage's inclinations, Muslims and immigrants and black people will, as has been the case in the UK for a very long time, be in the most danger if we continue on our current trajectory. But that doesn't mean we won't be hit by this. Just look at history. This is why it's important to not just oppose transphobia and fight back against that, but to fight for all oppressed people, to forge links of solidarity with Muslim communities, black communities, GRT communities, disabled communities, and immigrant communities of all stripes. Of course, we should be doing that anyway. We should have empathy and want to fight for the safety and dignity of everyone, no matter who they are or what we have going on. But it will also help you in the long term. And these fights are rarely won alone. The fact that travel advisory warnings were just issued for trans people, declaring the UK is not a welcoming country for trans and gender diverse people, and warning people not to travel here for fear of what they will face, should be a wake-up call. We are approaching the precipice. The horrendous, bigoted policies of Keir Starmer and his cabinet have brought several communities in this country to breaking point. Not just trans people, but trans people are, yes, one of the groups affected.
From the outside, it seems so obvious what is to be done that it's almost shocking it wasn't implemented immediately. What are the particular practical stumbling blocks that institutions are running into, saying that, we can't possibly institute this because?
It's so interesting. I mean, on the day of the judgment, a friend of mine who's a lawyer who was there with me and all the other women who were in the Supreme Court listening to it being handed down, she turned to me and she said, there's nothing left for us to do. I tease her about that every time I see her. We genuinely thought that organisations would be pleased to have clarity, that they would be pleased to do it. I mean, what everyone with any sanity knows is the right thing to do. So we really thought that organisations would go, oh, brilliant, clarity, we'll go back to the way it was before the gender madness.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, fine, you've made your point, things are bad. But Keir Starmer is gone now, so things can only get better. Andy Burnham is about to come in and save the day. The King in the North is here, number 10 and number 10 North, if that's still going to be a thing. He's going to make Labour, Labour again, and Farage will become completely irrelevant, never to be seen again, evil defeated forever, good wins, Manchesterism everywhere. And if you do think that, if you do believe the King in the North is going to reverse all of this and save us all from what his predecessor has done, despite him keeping many of his worst ministers, refusing in interviews to say he would change any of these horrible decisions, and despite the fact that Nigel Farage has been a fixture in British politics now for over a decade, his demise over and over again called and greatly exaggerated, despite my and presumably your wishes, I'm afraid you are at best naive. And I wish you the best, truly. My sweet summer child.
Everyone's always told me I was stupid.
And what did you do when people said you were stupid, sir?
What business is that of yours?
Okay, maybe that's not entirely fair. I, after all, cannot predict the future. At least not until Dan breaks into the Newsnight set and steals the souls of the entire BBC News team in about 20 minutes. It is possible, I suppose, that Andy Burnham, on the run-up to his coronation as a new Labour leader, has just been lying to a lot of people. That nothing he's said to journalists, nothing his team has leaked, nothing his fellow MPs have told us that he does or does not want to do is wrong. But really, what are the chances? When someone tells you who they are, as they say, believe them. Or do you want to end up like the countless people in this country who somehow convinced themselves that Keir Starmer was lying to the press and actually wanted to do Corbynism in a suit? The problem really lies in who Andy Burnham is. And the fact is, he is a chameleon. He has been a right-wing Labour ghoul. He voted for the Iraq War. He was famously ruthless at that time. He has also been the leftmost candidate in a Labour leadership election, only outflanked by Jeremy Corbyn. He's been the mayor of a very left-wing city, and for the most part he is really beloved by that city, in a way that's quite rare for a politician from his wing of the Labour Party. But as the Greens have been saying when asked if Andy Burnham becoming leader of the Labour Party spells trouble for the insurgent left-wing party, it really depends which Andy Burnham we get.
I do understand why people have responded to Jeremy Corbyn. People are fed up with the way politics is. They're fed up with a Labour Party that sometimes has looked like a pale imitation of the Tories. They want something different.
The reason I voted for military action
was because the leader of the Iraqi Kurds came to Parliament and pleaded with us not to back down. He said that if you leave Saddam emboldened, that will just be misery for our people. And I think, what they may not really be fair about to the people who make those claims is that this isn't a kind of black or white situation. If we had left Saddam in place at that time, other people would have suffered. There wasn't a kind of easy answer, was there?
Now, since I wrote the first couple of drafts of this script, he has promised a lot more things. Some of them sound pretty good. But also, look at who he's picked for cabinet, and he definitely hasn't changed his mind on trans people, at least vocally, unless he's keeping it very close to the chest. Since we've been talking about trans rights here, it's notable that in 2022, Andy Burnham positioned himself as an advocate for trans people and someone who wanted trans rights and protections to increase to the point where we aren't just a pariah class walking around being flogged by the entire political and media class of the country. But on the campaign trail, he apparently told journalists when he launched his campaign to be MP in Makerfield that he backs the new EHRC guidance, meaning Andy Burnham will, according to the words of Jerry Scott at the Times, keep and enforce the completely unenforceable and cruel bathroom ban on single-sex spaces across the UK, ban on sports, and the de facto removal of legal recognition and protection from discrimination for trans people. Now, he did try and take a both sides approach to his wording on this, but so did every Labour MP that has championed the guidance, and that is defending this obvious infringement on our rights. They really think that they're threading a needle, when what they are actually doing is bludgeoning an already struggling group of people whose votes you will probably need to win another election. Maybe he said this on the fly. Maybe he doesn't have a position on it yet and tried to give a non-answer, but it didn't sound like a non-answer. And he certainly will have heard, as mayor of one of the cities with one of the largest trans populations in the country, what the issues are with this guidance. I would love to be wrong about this, but I don't think I will be, sadly. And since Wes Streeting dropped out of a potential leadership challenge, the architect of the repeated attacks on our community has been rewarded, not with his former job of head child unaliver, or as he likes to call it, health secretary, but as head everyone aliver in the Department of Defence.
I'm going to wander the country in some dystopian manner, involuntarily jabbing fat people at the checkout.
Things are not looking good in terms of turning things around for immigrants, for Muslims, and the attacks on civil liberties either, since Burnham has kept on Shabana Mahmood, who, similarly to Streeting, has made it her mission to be as cruel as possible to every marginalised person she can, seemingly just addicted to causing suffering. Again, I would love to be proven wrong about this, but I don't think I will be. And things for those already suffering will likely continue to get worse, or at best, see no improvement. And when a disappointing centrist takes over the leftmost option available to voters and makes it clear that it is no path to change, people, over and over again, desperate for change in a system that is clearly broken, go for the next available candidate perceived as anti-establishment. So, speaking of cruel, our next Prime Minister after Andy Burnham, unless things change very quickly, will almost certainly be Nigel Farage. And yes, I know that he's resigned. He's standing in his constituency again. He is by far the most popular candidate there, and Reform by far the most popular party. And now every other party has dropped out apart from Count Binface, Lawrence Fox of all people, and a bunch of other nonsense people no one cares about.
Are they running scared from old Binny?
They seek a cure for the conversation. They seek to murder your opinion.
I hope he loses, but it would be very strange for him to lose this. And if he does win not only this silly vanity by-election, but then doesn't get charged for his corruption and then goes on to win the Prime Ministership, we're going to go from the Labour Right's attempts to govern as the far-right party while claiming to be anything but, to a far-right party that is not ashamed of the implications of that label. Despite the awful shit Keir Starmer has hurled at us again and again, under an explicitly fascist Britain, things will get worse. And when things get worse, they can get worse very, very quickly.
These ICE agents. The left believes they can do anything they want, and we're just supposed to sit down and take it. It's time for Americans to say enough, and if you get in the way of the government repelling a foreign invasion, you're going to end up just like that lady did yesterday.
Farage, weirdly for a far-right party leader, but much like Donald Trump before he won the 2016 election, does not really talk about trans people much. In fact, unlike Labour, there have been some reform talking heads in the media who call the EHRC guidance and the subsequent bathroom ban unenforceable, though there are also many, many more ghouls. This is not because Farage is pro-trans, God no, but that he probably doesn't think about us that much at all. But the rest of the people in his party, a lot of his MPs, most of his MPs, really, really, really hate us. More Reform MPs are ideologically committed to destroying trans rights than even the Labour Party, currently taking a sledgehammer to the very concept. And for other marginalised groups, things will get much, much worse. Already, we've had calls for remigration, mass deportations, major restrictions on immigrants, Muslims, asylum seekers, anyone the party deems as not British enough to deserve to live in this country.
But do we realistically think, Ezio, we can deport 500,000-600,000 people in the lifetime of the first Parliament?
Totally, yeah.
And of course the extremely Reform UK policy of building concentration camps in areas that vote Green.
His party's plans to turn migrant detention centres, or build them rather, in areas that vote for the Green Party.
The policy is very simple. You vote for a Reform MP, you will not have a detention facility in your constituency. But if you vote Green, or those that support open borders in the world, that's where the detention centres are going to be. Equally, I could say the same of Labour and the Conservatives, because they've done nothing to stop it. And what you'll get with this policy, you'll get what you vote for.
Something that somehow the media was not entirely horrified by and just acted like it was a little bit of banter. I'm sorry, this man announced he was going to build camps all over the country. The same man who spent his school days talking about gassing the Jews, and you're still putting him all over our TVs and acting like he's someone worthy of airtime, let alone respect?
It's a bit early in the day, so all I've got actually is coffee, but I hope you enjoy a few pints with the lads tonight. Up the rah!
What did you do with Big Chungus? We know you're the sus imposter. Happy birthday, Hugh Janus.
Maybe we turn this around. Maybe Andy Burnham will actually do some things, but I doubt it will be enough. Maybe Nigel Farage will, by some miracle, lose the by-election to Count Binface, a man literally with a bin on his face, but I doubt it. And if he does, what's to stop him doing what he's done before and making a new party and running again, or just running again for the same party somewhere else? Maybe he'll go to jail for taking a £5 million bribe from a convicted criminal. It's possible, but this is the same legal system, don't forget, that refused to touch literal Epstein affiliates Peter Mandelson and the former Prince Andrew, and arrested people en masse for opposing crimes against humanity, under Shabana Mahmood, who's just been re-elected to that job, so she can continue doing that, by the way. So really, what are the chances? Maybe I've become cynical. Maybe there's a reason I sound cynical, and it's because the last time people tried to convince me that despite everything that was being said, change was just around the corner, I was proven right, over and over again, in ways that deeply hurt me, my community, people I care about, and the most vulnerable in society. If anyone is to blame for me disbelieving that there is someone coming to rescue us, it was Keir Starmer's horror show of a government. But honestly, I never believed there was someone coming to save us. It was always up to us to save ourselves. And the same is true now as it was then. We need to stop sitting back and actually start advocating for ourselves and become a force to be reckoned with. Physically impossible to stamp down like we have been for so long in this country. And that remains the case even if the best case scenario happens, even if Andy Burnham somehow is the great pretender, and he actually undoes the damage of his predecessor. Even if Farage loses this election and goes to prison for a very long time, we will not be out of the woods. The damage Starmer has done to trans people, to immigrants, to the disabled, to this country will not be undone without a fight. And even then, there's a lot there to undo. It might take a very long time. There is too much salt in the earth to expect a quick turnaround, even if everything that can go right goes right. And it is likely that this country will require something much more drastic to make this a place that people feel safe living in again. A new foundation. Because if Starmerism is the only thing that the Labour Party can offer without stabbing itself repeatedly in the back, and the army and the empire across the sea threatening it, then the case has been proven, as it has been many times before, that as long as the structures that produce monsters like Starmer, like Farage, remains in place, we will never achieve the world we wish to see. The world we need to not just survive but thrive in. If you're still in doubt, go out there and prove me wrong. Please. It all seems a little bleak, doesn't it? When I first started transitioning in this country, by which I mean when I had my first appointment with the gender clinic, one of several over years before I got any sort of help, and even more years before I got an actual working dose of estrogen, the year was 2014. Before Brexit, before the trans panic had really taken off, before J.K. Rowling's brain was possessed by the mold from Resident Evil 7, before Chaos with Ed Miliband even.
Am I tough enough? Tough enough? Hell yes, I'm tough enough.
Life as a trans person back then seemed to me then near impossible, but it looked hopeful. It looked like things would, if slowly, get better for us. And now it's 12 years later. Compared to now, the UK government's position on trans rights back then looks downright utopian. Just 2 short years after that first appointment, we would enter a world where the leaders of the 2 major parties, Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May, were both pro-trans rights, at least in rhetoric. Both made noises about implementing self-ID and reducing the insanely long waiting lists at the UK's gender clinics. I joined Labour under Jeremy Corbyn. It was because of him that I began reading about socialism, that I genuinely gave myself a political education beyond individual policies and party politics. I had a hope back then. His Labour Party was the first Labour Party in decades that was worthy of the name. And the Labour Party, despite its many, many faults, remained a source of hope for so many of us, especially after the Tories swung extremely hard against trans people, immigrants, Muslims, disabled people, people they had already hurt, but decided to crank the cruelty up on over and over again. These same groups that formed a huge part of Labour's base, that needed help, that had hope for a better world because of people like Corbyn and what he represented, are the same groups that the Labour Party now spends much of its political capital actively trying to destroy. Because of the right-wing coup in the party, orchestrated by a man who lied about what he represented and what he wanted to do, and turned the one source of hope for the future in this god-forsaken island into a party even more cruel, violent, and sociopathic than any that have held power since World War II. A man by the name of Keir Starmer. Well, Sir Keir, you've done it now. Karma's come to tap you on the shoulder. Your attacks on queers and protesting, and of course the Epstein thing is coming now to crush you like a boulder. You ruined everything, you stupid bitch. You ruined everything, you stupid, stupid bitch. You're just a lying little bitch who ruins things and wants the world to burn. Bitch. go to The Hague. Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Unless I manage to do some miracle in the editing, this is going to be a real long one, so give it a hype, please spread it around, like it, leave a comment, subscribe, give it a hype, smash the hype button, tell everyone about it, tell all about it, and for everything else, please, 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 please help me out. I have been going through some stuff. I cut all caffeine and to get on ADHD meds, and then I got massive migraines and psychological and physical withdrawal, as you might expect from that. And I had a bit of a big breakdown, but I'm back. I'm trying to catch up with the schedule. I think I'm mostly managing, but I'd really, really like it if as many of you joined my Patreon as possible, even if it's just a little bit. I've been back in the UK for, like, oh God, I don't want to think about it, 8 months now? That's horrible. And I'd really like to actually finally get out of my overdraft and start being able to get myself on track and eventually be able to move into a different place and have a normal independent life again. And if you want to help out with that, you can give one-time donations on Ko-fi or PayPal, as always, links below, or better yet, sign up to my Patreon or maybe YouTube memberships, which would really, really help and go so far towards me being able to pull my life back together and to be able to get me back on my feet before my 35th birthday. Jesus, I'm old. So you have until October, I guess. And if you sign up to my Patreon or my YouTube memberships, you will get early videos, uncensored videos, access to the members-only Discord, my Nintendo Switch friend code, exclusive content such as long-form interviews with previous guests of the show, and in addition to all the good stuff, you'll also get a name right at the end of the video, just like these lovely people. Violet Evergarden, Kamui, AX, Robert McCallan, Montana Schmidbauer, Zach Beavan, Mia Miyaski, Eva Kebab, Marty Hunt, Jane Luciferian, Melissa Allen, Sarah Francesca Smith, Lawrence M, Mongolian Shaman, Spurious Machinery, Tor Nielsen, Ulu Pattinson, Scuzzbopper, T. Rook, Serena D, Karina Kuriakow, David Cropper, Harlow, Dini Mweta ADHD, Dan Shaped Blob, Achu, Graffitia _ Ekachu, Jonah Fart 2, Cat, read this fart noise out. Uncast Shadow of a Southern Myth, Rain, Will, Alexandra Barnes, ReeseNet, Ken Sorden. Hello, Kirsty. Yes, you, Kirsty. Hi, I'm talking to you. Can you hear me? Georgie, Carlita Del Mazzotte, Anna Nicholson, Dungeon Slime, Naomi Gorman, Melody, Heidi Law, Transform and Function, Cara Patching, Mattia98, Elizabeth Dawn, Spin Noir, Victor Lufgren, Gil the Gilded Dragon, A Slice of Cake, Rue, Mountiam, Gina Service, You Are Made Off Stupid, Tomo, Melissa Jackson, Ren approves of your stuff, Minstrel of course, Jeffreyon, Tom the Not Quite So Brave as Sir Lancelot, Elefar, Treaquoy, Ariella, Proquar, Robin Rocks, Millie Eisenberg, Garlic Scape, Kira B, No Sparkling Heart, Corey, Joanna J, Mighty Than the Sword, Imogen Q, Luciano Frias Andrade, Adam, Harry, Ndog191, Quesadilla de Tortilla Azul, Leon, Adam Lees, Daniel Nevels, No Not That Paul, MB, Wandering Wonder, Ashling Murphy, Lex Phoenix, Enter Cruzitz, Mira D, J Senior, Boa Ear, James W, Deborah Laboon, Zilla Athenaeum, Vince Whitaker, Amelia Sett, J, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helen Ariel, Sierra Whiskey, Ali Hatgill, John N, Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Raven Tempest. Why do I say Trampest? Trampest isn't a thing. The Trampest. Write that one, Shakespeare. Come back from the grave and write that one. Shield Daden, Robin Podolsky, Nightlight Plushy Jesus, Mantare, Courtney Bermack, Sleepy Slug, Saloma Piglet, Brain Douche, Artie Wolf, Gianna McMillan, Carolyn Regalado, Alexandra Lilly, and Howard Lott. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you. This means the world that you're here. Yeah. Things are tricky, and you're the reason I can continue and aren't always having a panic attack about my situation, housing and finances and life, and being on the precipice of I know when's middle age start? Not now, obviously. I'm not saying now, but it does loom. It does seem to loom, and yeah, that's worrying. Okay. I'm gonna go in a minute. I hope Andy Burnham is better than he's making out. I want to have hope. I don't. Not for him anyway. I have hope in the future. For other reasons that you might expect, given that electoralism doesn't seem to be working. There are, well, okay. let me stop there. I don't want to get put on a watch list. Goodbye.